And welcome to another exciting episode of The Energy That Surrounds Us. I'm your host, Michael. And tonight's show is being pre-recorded because the guest I'm bringing on is so cool that she has such a busy schedule that wanted to make sure everything was calm, collective, and we had time to talk about things. And so nobody was rushed. So I hope you all in the chat room will listen and appreciate the fact that, yes, this is pre-recorded. So with that being said, I am going to introduce a guest to you all who has a story that I am very interested in hearing about, and I'm sure you all will as well. So without further ado, I give you Karin Wilkinson.
Hi, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you accommodating my schedule as my travel schedule kind of keeps changing around a bit. This way, I know we could be in a nice, quiet environment and I could really respond to questions. But for any listeners who have questions, just send me a message through my website and I will happily answer your questions if you have any after the interview.
Thank you for that. And so for those who obviously we can see, you being an author and that you wrote a book about a stolen seed, evil harvest. Would you mind giving people a little bit of background of who and what you talk about? Because then they might understand a little bit more of the interesting aspect that I was mentioning.
Yeah, sure. So the book is Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest, and it is the account of my lifetime of abductions being taken by non-human, what people will call alien entities. And it chronicles the different things that happened from my earliest memories of being taken, which are my earliest memories in life, to up until about 7 or 8 years ago when I was finally able to stop it from happening and the myriad of things that happened in between there and who and what I believe these things are and what they want. So it's definitely been an interesting journey, not something I expected to write, but I was in touch with L.A. Marzulli, excuse me, and shared my story first with him. And that became the center point for his fourth movie in the Alien series that he's on, the UFO series he did called On Alien Abductions. And after that, it inspired just so many conversations with people that inspired me to write the rest of the story and more of the story of my lifetime of experiences. And it's been a really incredible opportunity just to meet with people, talk with people, share with people, and to be able to start a conversation around the whole alien abduction thing, because it's been put in such a negative light. You're crazy, you're delusional, you're this, you're that if you dare bring something like this up. And what we're trying to do is say, hey, this is real. It happens to so many people all the time. Your friends, your neighbors, you don't know who, because no one will talk about it, but it happens to more people than you would think.
And talk about fun stuff of life. That was me hitting my mouse.
Oh dear.
I heard you say, and it piqued my interest when you said, and I'm sure people would love to hear how you managed this, but when you said you managed to stop the abductions from happening,
Yes.
what did you go through and how did you do that for people who are experiencing this?
Right. It came down to my faith and my understanding of who they were, who I am, and who both of us were created by. And I had found my faith when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and really fallen away from that and didn't really understand what it meant to have that understanding and that faith. But it didn't mean I had to be a certain kind of person or go to a very specific kind of church. It meant that I had to have a faith and an understanding and a choice for me. And it's not a choice I make for anyone else. Everyone has to make their own individual choice in that matter. And everyone's, I appreciate everyone's different choices in that matter. But for me, once I realized, hey, they have the same creator that I have, and I called on my creator, I called on God, and I believe in Jesus, I believe in the Christian Bible, and when I called on God to help me and Jesus to help me, these things stopped in their tracks. And they're like, oh, hey, we can't touch her. And they confirmed everything that I had really known for a long time, but just hadn't allowed myself, I walked away from basically. So once I was able to understand that I could call on Jesus' name, that I could call on Yahweh when they were trying to come and get me, and they would just stop and leave instantly, it was life changing and it was amazing. And I've never been so grateful in my life for anything. It was just incredible. And it's been incredible to share that and to watch other people be able to stop this in their lives because it's terrible what's happening to people and what they did to me, let alone to other people.
Right. And I'm curious, how did all of this start? Like, when did you first realize that you were being abducted and going through all of this?
Well, my earliest memories are of being taken by them. So when I was really little, around 2 or 3 years old, I was afraid of members of my father's family because they were very tall, blonde, fair haired, fair eyed, fair skinned. And they reminded me, they looked similar to these Nordic entities that I had already been encountering who scared me, who I wasn't comfortable with. And so I was terrified of those family members and they couldn't understand why. And I couldn't vocalize that to them. I didn't have a vocabulary for it. As I started, once you get to about 4, 5, 6 years old, and I have more vivid memories, and that's kind of when we do is humans begin to have those memories that we hold on to. I have very vivid memories of them coming at night, coming into my room, and typically, and taking me and being abducted from a very early age. And typically, it would just be an a night when any night, didn't matter if someone else was in the room with me or not. If someone else was in the room, like a sibling or something, if I tried to wake that sibling up, they would just be out cold. Like I couldn't wake them up. Like they were put into a deep sleep state. I would feel a change in the room, feel an evil presence. I would feel this evil, different presence in the room. It's a palpable change. Um, Often it would be accompanied by this low vibrational hum that just kind of would take over my body. It was almost like holding on to a bass speaker. Sometimes there'd be lights coming through the windows. If we were in the countryside, often the crickets and cicadas would just go silent. And the next thing I know, there would be at least 2 or more entities in the room. They were the typical, what people report as the gray alien entities, about 3 feet tall, big bulbous heads, big black screen eyes that didn't move like screens, very frail, very thin and small. Some of them smelled really bad. Some of them had like kind of a sulfur, dead animal, urine, feces kind of smell about them, and some didn't smell at all, but some of them had worse smells than others. And they would be somewhere in the room, sometimes back in a corner, in a doorway, at the foot of the bed, just depending. It was different every time. They would, at that point, sometimes I would just be so scared because I knew it was coming. And I tried to hide. As a little kid, I tried to hide, and I just couldn't find anywhere to hide that they didn't find me. And I remember once my sister telling me, it doesn't matter where you hide, they can see you through the house. Little kids having conversations like that at like 5 and 8 years old. That's crazy, right? But I would get so scared. Sometimes I'd wet the bed. I'd try to scream out, but no one would hear me. They would put me into a state of paralysis where I couldn't move my body. I couldn't scream out, and levitate me off the bed in and out. At that point, I would go through a ceiling or through a window, or maybe down a hall and through another window. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's, these entities can manipulate space, time, energy, and matter in ways that doesn't make sense to us. More and more it is, as more and more of our technology is increasing and improving. But so I would see details in the ceiling, like little, marks on the ceiling or the wallpaper at my grandma's house where it would get a little bit brown and curled on the edges, or bugs in a light, or the details in the screen of the window where, all the little squares weren't even and some were broken and some were bent, things like that. And that vibration feeling, that bass kind of feeling would get really strong as I was going through. Often at that point, I would be put into like a sleep state. Things would go black. And sometimes I would wake up on like a metal steel table, like a exam table, with different kinds of entities around me, taller, different grays, the grays that would do whatever they took me to do that particular time. Those grays were different than the little ones. These grays are taller, they're more robust. They had faces and facial expressions that moved, like their eyes moved. Their eyes were still very black, but they moved. And their like foreheads would, move. And they had they didn't all look the same, just the way we don't all look the same. They had differences about them. And they'd be the ones doing like examinations, invasive things, sticking needles in me or doing I don't know what, because they never stopped to tell me what the things were they were doing. But as a little kid, it was terrifying. And I was trying to tell people what was happening to me, but we didn't have vocabulary for it then. There weren't UFO shows and podcasts and movies and books and things that I could reference. Little kids nowadays have UFO toys and things like that. We didn't have anything like that. And so I didn't know how to say what was happening to me, but I was trying, you know. And they warned me that if I spoke, that they would hurt my family. And they showed me a screen memory of them beheading my family in front of me. And I write a lot more about that in the book. But it just, I was just a little kid. And it was one of the most horrifying experiences of my life. And I was probably only 5 or 6 years old when that happened. I guess probably 6. Because then after that, I think I kind of gave up a little bit. And they found me in the school bathroom, huddled in the corner, just rocking, holding my knees. And they had to call my mom to come get me. I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't move. I wouldn't get out of the stall. And she came and got me and took me to the doctor. And I was trying to talk about the ones who got me, the ones who touched me. They were doing stuff to me. They thought maybe I was talking about older kids or something. So they did an exam. He's like, well, she's got, marks and bruises and stuff on her. But whatever happened, she's young. She'll forget. And I think it was at that point I realized no one was going to help me. And what was happening to me, I had to give into it. And that point, I disassociated from it. And I just created 2 parts of my life. The part where I lived the kind of everyday life, and the part where they were, these ones that came to get me. I didn't even have vocabulary. I didn't even know what to call them. I mean, the first time I passed Whitley Strieber's book in a bookstore, I had a panic attack. I mean, I thought they were going to take me to the hospital. I really thought I was going to have a heart attack. That's how horrible it was to know that someone else drew a picture of what these things look like. Because I couldn't watch UFO shows. I can't read UFO books. None of that. That stuff is just not something I could do because it was just so traumatic my whole life. So that's kind of the beginning. I know that's a long answer to your question. Sorry, but interrupt me if you want to ask a question. I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great, and I appreciate the information. And one question I had is when you say they showed you, like, the beheading of your family and threatening you, was that the Greys or the Nordics or the tall Greys?
Yeah,
Who was the they?
that's a good question. The thing about the they, when I put them, I'm kind of lumping them all together. When I was taken, and I was taken to these underground facilities, we would get in these elevators that just went down and down, and it was always cold. And then we'd get in these elevators, and I called them the sideways elevators because they would go side to side or up at an angle or down at an angle. I realize now they were trains probably because they had benches in them, but we didn't have quiet vehicles back then. So I had nothing to relate that to.
Right.
But back to your question, all of those types were there. There were Nordic types. There were the small grays, the type that came to get me, and I believe those are like Avatar holding. They're kind of like meat suits. I believe they're created for very specific purposes, which I talk about a lot in the book, and I've written quite a bit about in other papers. Then so the Nordics were there, the taller grays were there, the reptilian type entities were there, and there were insect type entities, and there were different variations of those, but just to put them in those general four categories, kind of, there's some crossover between some of those categories sometimes too when you look at some of them. But that generalizes who they are. They were all working together, and not only them, but there were humans working with them as well. So there were a lot of different types there, where I was taken. And and these were not benevolent, good meaning, well meaning entities. What they were doing was evil, was wrong, was bad. I have a lifetime of just torture at their hands and watching other people and animals be tortured at their behest. Not to say that there aren't good beings, because there are. These entities, that's when later in life, when I started to learn about what angelic beings were, the light just went off. I'm like, I know what these are. They're because there are good ones and bad ones. And I've had interactions with beautiful, wonderful, benevolent angelic beings too. So both types exist. Benevolent, the good ones, the ones that are still working for the good, working for God, and then there are the fallen. And that's the type that were abducting me and taking me from early childhood on throughout the rest of my life.
And I find it interesting because in all of my research into the races and the beings, I've never really come across Nordics being described as the ones who would go and abduct and do experiments on people. I've always heard them
Really?
as being the benevolent.
I've
And
talked.
so it's interesting how you bring that up because the other fact of that is, looking into the reptilians and seeing that, yes, the reptilians are bad, but there are some good. And so there's the good and the bad factions in each. And so I appreciate you bringing that up and sharing that because I think a lot of people view, unfortunately, the races as like reptilian, bad. Um, the Andromedans, good. And they just group them all together and they don't realize that there's factions, just like
Ex-
we have factions.
exactly, exactly. That is such a good point, and it's a point that really needs to get out there, because you put yourself in danger if you decide, well, all Nordics are good and all reptilians are bad, or what have you, because God created all these creatures, and we know, that a third of them from certain perspectives fell. And the thing is, when you're encountering a benevolent versus a malevolent entity, and these entities are far advanced of us, far more superior intellectually and with abilities that we don't understand, and they're interdimensional on top of it. They're so farther ahead of us. When you encounter one and you're trying to figure out, is this a good one or a bad one? Do you think the bad guys are going to tell you they're the bad guys? I mean, that's like if someone's coming up to steal your purse or your wallet or carjack you, they don't walk around with a T-shirt that says, "Hey, I'm a carjacker," or "Hey, I'm stealing everyone's wallets to line up." It doesn't work that way. These things are deceptive, and that's just the nature of it. So, to be able to discern the good from the evil, we don't have that capability in us. And for one of these entities to come and say, it's okay, I'm a good guy, I'm not here to hurt you. Well, I'm sorry, you just kidnapped me. I'm 6 years old. I'm terrified. You've left burn marks and permanent markings and permanent implants in my body and the bodies of my friends. And I put pictures in my book of that. It just doesn't make sense. If you go kidnap your neighbor's kid, you're going to jail. Not to
Well,
mention
and
that child's going to be traumatized. So,
yeah,
you
and
know,
not to mention too, if you're benevolent, you're not going to sit there and say to someone, "I'm the benevolent one." You kind of just
exactly.
let your actions speak for themselves, and
Thank you, right? If they're so good, why can't they come and give us the cures for diseases that are terminal and just come sit down and share information and talk with us in a pleasant way? Because it doesn't have to be done through channeling. It doesn't have to be done through astral projection. It doesn't have to be done through all this. They can come into our arena and share with us. There doesn't need to be any trickery. There doesn't need to be anything like that. It can all be done face to face if they wanted to, and in order to do that, you don't have to kidnap kids or, rape women or steal fetuses or anything like that. The number of people I talk to every day, Michael, who have been through these horrible traumatic experiences at the hands of some of these entities, it's staggering. And some people's lives are just destroyed because of it. And I just can't find any way to justify that. I just can't.
right. And unfortunately, though, I believe if the benevolence were to come, they would not be greeted well because Hollywood and certain organizations have gone the extra mile to make us afraid of whoever's out there. So
Yeah,
it's like the adage of, we come in peace used to be like an international greeting of, hey, we're benevolent. We're here to help. Now it's we look at it as a precursor to war.
right. We don't know what to believe, right? There's so much predictive programming out there and so much of this parroted message to everyone that we have to be so careful. And that's why I caution anyone who is interested in these things to be very careful. Don't go calling on them because you don't know what you'll get. You might get a wonderful, loving, angelic entity, or you might get a really terrible, horrible one who is saying, yeah, let me in. I'm here to help you. Well, they follow, my friend Vicky Joy Anderson. It's like the vampire thing. Once you invite them across the threshold, you're in trouble.
Yeah,
And you don't know what you're going to get. Have you got animals? Have you got friends? Have you got family? Have you got loved ones? Who are you putting in danger? And
right,
so it's a cautionary tale of, knowing what our strengths and weaknesses are and what theirs are, and that there is a way, like I said, there is a way to stop them. And, I highly recommend Vicki Joy Anderson's book for that alone, and many other things. But I had benevolent angelic entities help me when I was in the hospital once, and it was amazing. And there was no doubt that they were good. All they did was come in, help, do what they were meant to, intended to do to help me, and they were on their way. I wanted them to stay. I wanted to introduce them to everyone, but they couldn't. They didn't, because they just came to do a good thing and not interfere. And then they were
right.
gone.
Mm.
And it was, oh, and the feeling I got from them, Michael, was amazing. It was this love and the kindness that just emanated from them, but I didn't call on them. They came when prayed for help.
Yeah, I think
So
it's a subconscious calling. I don't think it's
yeah. Hmm.
verbal. And when I say subconscious, I mean like the energy emanates
Hmm.
out so that there's no words. It's like another language.
Hmm. It is, you're right. And and I was praying in my head, obviously, because I had had a near-death experience. If you want, I can talk about that if you want me to.
Sure.
Okay. And it was very cool. The way it happened wasn't cool. Um, I was waiting for a surgery, and they took me into the operating room, which was highly unusual before the doctor was ready. And I had two IV ports in, one in each arm, but I wasn't hooked up to any machines or any monitors or any IV bags or anything yet. And a woman came in, and she was either a anesthesiologist or a nurse anesthetist. I don't know which because she didn't tell me. And she leaned over me, and her lab coat had a pocket full of syringes in it. I remember that. And she pulled one out and put it in my IV port, and it was supposed to be a sedative. And she just turned and walked away. Well, she gave me a paralytic, and there was no one watching me. There was no one around me. I wasn't hooked up to anything. Yes, I know paralytics are commonly used during surgery, but that's when you're intubated and you have machines breathing for you. There are people watching you and, keeping you going when you can't breathe for yourself. So at that point, I was just alone. I died on the table until the nurses saw me. The nurses found me. And not too long later, but I left my body. I remember laying there going, "Oh, help me," in my head. "God, please help me." And I heard an audible voice in my head say, "It's okay. You can let go now." And in the blink of an eye, I was out of my body. I was still me. That struck me so strongly that I was still me, my personality, the person I am now, just without the body and none of our physical characteristics, just outside of the physical. I felt the most love and peace I've ever felt in my life. There's no way to even describe how beautiful it was. It was the most beautiful experience of my life. And I watched everything that was going on. I watched the nurses running around. I watched them go into the other room. I could see through the walls without, having doors open. I could see what was going on in the other rooms. They went into another room. They grabbed the doctor, and he ran into the room yelling, bag her," and they put a bag thing on my face, but it didn't work. And a bunch of more people started coming in, and this a male anesthesiologist came in and intubated me, and that's when everything went black. And many hours later, after the surgery, because they went forward with it, I woke up in recovery with a bunch of doctors and nurses around me. And I was just screaming in pain every time they'd bring me out of anesthesia. And about 4 hours into that, which never takes me 4 hours through recovery, I remember saying, "God, please help me. Why didn't you keep me? Why did you put me back in this body to be in so much pain?" I mean, my pain was at a 20 out of 10, it was terrible. All of a sudden, there were these two beautiful young male orderlies standing at the foot of the bed. And I instantly felt at peace. I instantly felt comforted. I didn't mind the pain. The pain didn't bother me anymore. I just talked to them. I remember telling them, "You look like you could be two of my kids," because I have lots of kids that call me mom. And I'm like, "You look like you could be two of my sons. Oh my gosh, thank you." I talked to them all the way up to my ICU room. And it was like a sub ICU, not like, anyway. We get to the doorway of my room. My husband and my daughter-in-law are the two who are waiting for me because I could have two visitors. I grabbed their hands. I'm like, "You have to meet the boys. They are so sweet. I would not have gotten out of recovery without them." And I look at the foot of bed, and they're not there. And sorry. And so they're like, "Who are you talking about? What are you talking about?" And all of a sudden, they're not there. I look at the other nurse and the orderly, and I'm like, "What happened to the boys that were with me?" And she's like, "Honey, I don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, "They were with us in the elevator down the hall. They were with us in recovery. They had no idea who I was talking about." She's like, "I wondered who you were talking to," like I was crazy. They were there. They were wearing scrubs. I realized thinking about it, oh, they didn't have badges. That's interesting. And they both looked similar to each other, but not identical. And nobody else saw them but me. And they were just gone. But I mean, it still makes me smile so big to think about how wonderful they were to me. They didn't interfere in any way. They just helped me. It was so amazing. And you could tell they were beings of light because I felt it, I felt it. It was amazing. So that was my near-death / angelic experience, which was such a beautiful experience. I did have a lot of PTSD after that, though, and I went to PTSD therapy for it. And that's why I was able to start dealing with the lifetime of the abductions that I experienced. And that's what led me to meet L.A. Marzulli. So.
Okay, yeah, and it's interesting that while you were telling your story about the kids, I had to scratch my head because I was starting to like tingle, and I was like, "Is that an itch or what?" And
Oh,
then I had pop in my head and go, "They weren't there."
yeah.
And it was like I was picking up that
Well, you
those
have
things
angels
were
around you right
not
now. That's
there.
amazing. I love it. You got the angels touching you. I love that. That's wonderful. Ooh, now I got goosebumps.
I'm wondering, not to go back too far, but
Mhm.
I'm curious of all the times that you can recall being abducted and taken. Was it always the Greys that would grab you and pick you up, or was it sometimes some of the other beings would come and say, "Okay, we're here to
Mhm.
take you off"?
Right. The memories that I have are only of the Greys showing up. That doesn't mean that there weren't ever other ones around or maybe that came, but I have no vivid memories that I can recall right now of anything other than in my room, the only ones I ever saw were the Greys. Now, once if I was somewhere else, like outside, I'm trying to think if there was ever that's a really good question. I'm gonna have to think about that. But as far as at night and when they would come for me, it was always the short Greys. Um, yeah. Think if ever but once I got to where I was going, or if I was put on a ship or a transport, there would be other types of entities there. And then once I got to, say, like the elevators or down into the underground facilities, which are massive, by the way. I mean, these things are under our feet and they're bigger than anyone can imagine. And it's it's incredible what's actually just happening under our feet. But, then that's where all the other entities would be, and I always wondered if it's because they couldn't be in our sunlight, or they had issues with our atmosphere, or if they just didn't want, to risk being seen or captured because the grays that the little shorter ones, I've seen them empty, other people have reported seeing them empty, so I think they're like a vessel to hold AI or hold even another entity or to hold a demon or something like that. Um, so that's why I think they use those because if something gets captured or maybe there's a crash and the crash retrievals where they have biologics, all they're going to get's an empty suit.
Right, and it's interesting that you point that out because I've always thought of the Greys, meaning the short 3 foot tall Greys,
Hmm.
as being like the drones.
Yeah.
Like they're the worker bee, and they don't really do anything except bringing you from point A to point B and setting up, and then the others would come in. And so it's interesting that you say you've seen them empty, shelled, and the same experience. So that's great confirmation and validation of that thought. And the other thing too that I thinking about is when you say stolen seed, evil harvest. I would love for you to explain what you're talking about because everyone these days, all the stories and everything can interpret it so many different ways.
Hmm. Sure. Yeah, that's a great question too, and that really is the center point of the book. And I have spoken with and had so many women reach out to me that and been in contact with so many women who have gone through this as well that I think my next book is probably going to focus on not just on all of these women and men too who've had these types of experiences because there are a lot of them and the stories are heartbreaking but at the same time important because every woman I've talked to who's had these experiences that I have has been healed by sharing, and sometimes just sharing and having something in common with someone is the most healing thing you can do. So the stolen seed part refers to the fact that I have had missing pregnancies. In the book, I provide for the readers a copy of the report published, and I think it was 2022, called the Acute and Subacute Anomalous Side Effects. And it's a government report that outlines all the side effects of people in their reporting that have been, and it goes back into the 1800s. This is how long the government's been collecting this data, that have been affected, and it's a small subset, but all the different things that have affected these people, different people that they've worked with and talked to. The data collected identifies a ton of different, and I list them out, of different issues. One of these is missing pregnancies. Fetuses just suddenly disappearing from someone. And not just suddenly, but it'll be like what happened in my case. I woke up in the middle of the night, the first one, and this happened several times. And I wasn't feeling good. My stomach hurt. Felt crampy. I was spotting, but nothing had come out of me. And I was at the end of my first trimester, going into my second trimester of pregnancy. I was married. I had a confirmed pregnancy. I'd been to the doctor. I'd had all the tests done. I'd heard a heartbeat. I had a prescription. So, because back then you had to get a prescription for my prenatal vitamins. I had been on those for like a month or two already. Everything was going fine. I had no problems. But I felt my stomach hurt so bad that night, and I was spotting, and I knew that wasn't right, and I knew something was wrong. So we went to the emergency room. And also back then, they didn't have any direct access, the doctor to the emergency room, right? It was the middle of the night as well. I go into the emergency room, and they go in to check me out. And, at this point, I'm still verified pregnant. They can do blood tests and things like that. And they do there's no heartbeat. And so they do an ultrasound, and there's no baby. And they did a D&C, and there was no fetal tissue in my womb. None. And they're like, did you lose this baby at home? But it didn't make sense that there wouldn't be some fetal tissue left behind and something left behind. Nothing. I mean, my uterus was clean. That's not normal. And no, if I would know if I lost a baby at home, no matter how small it was, things would come out of me. There's more than just this tiny little bit of something that would come out. And I was devastated. Losing a child is one of the most devastating things that can happen to a parent, man or woman. And no one could tell me what happened to that baby. And I couldn't, I didn't have a baby to bury or to grieve. I didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. I was just in shock. And so much so, I know found a picture of myself right after that, like for a month or two after that. I mean, I looked like death. I was just like this tiny thin. It was terrible. Anyway, yeah, there was just no explanation for it. And that happened over and over again. And I've had successful pregnancies and babies. But that's the stolen seed and evil harvest. There was a time then when they took me, and I was taken, and I wake up, and they're walking me. I'm with a gray and like a Nordic entity. And the gray, it looks almost like a female. They did have features that some looked very feminine, some looked very masculine. They're walking me down a hallway, and it's dark lit, like a red backlight almost to it. And everything in the underground facilities in most places is very darkly lit, almost like with a blue or red backlighting, or violet some places. Anyway, so we're down this hallway, and the hallway is lined with what looks like aquariums in a pet shop. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where they'd have just rows of aquariums, one on top of the other.
Right.
That's what the hallway is, and it's really tall, a really high ceiling. And it goes all the way down the hallway, is lined with these like squares, and each of those squares has something in it. And I'm looking in these squares like, where am I? Getting my bearings. And I have the UFO brain fog that you get every time I be taken. They have this way, it just kind of makes everything muddled and confused in your head, so you don't think clearly. And L.A. Marzulli calls it UFO brain fog, and I agree with him. It just, you don't think as clearly as you should. Anyway, I'm looking and I'm going, what's in there? I don't see the fish, kind of thing. And I realize they're like fetuses. I don't know if they're human, if they're hybrids of alien human, or if they were animal. I don't know, and nobody told me. But some of them look humanish, and different stages and different sizes for the ones I could see. I obviously couldn't see all of them because some of them were up pretty high. And at the end of that part of the hallway, before it went from the tanks back to a normal hallway, there there was a door on either side of the ends of the hallway going kind of into it. And they opened one of the doors, and it was a room the size of a big closet. And they told me to go in the room. There was a woman in there imitating childbirth, which just that sight will never leave me to this day. It was just the weirdest sight. And she had her baby, and she was imitating as if she was going giving birth to it. Anyway, they handed me a baby, and they said, "This is your baby. It's a good baby. Hold your baby. It's a good baby." They kept saying, "It's a good baby. This is your baby," over and over again. So I take this baby, and it's very dark. It's almost reddish purple color, dark. It's very small, and its head is larger than a normal baby's head. Its eyes are larger than a normal baby's eyes. I noticed that right away. And I take this baby, and I'm holding it, and I'm trying to hold it up to me like I would one of, my babies, and trying to get it to cuddle it, and it won't cuddle into me. It wouldn't even respond to me holding it up against my body, against my skin. And I kept looking at it and trying to hold it, and I was getting really upset because the baby wouldn't respond to me. But it was my baby, and I knew it was my baby, so I'm like, "Well, what's wrong with my baby?" I got very upset, and they're like, "It's a good baby, it's fine, you're fine." They At that point, I was getting very upset, and I wanted my baby. I'm like, "I'm taking my baby home." They're like, "No." They turned me off, put me back to a sleep state. Everything goes black, and I wake up in my bed, and I'm just hysterical because I just had my baby in my arms, and I want it back. Even if it wasn't human, I still wanted a chance to try to take care of that baby. So that's the first time I saw one of them. And then again, I see them later. But so that's where the evil harvest part comes in.
I'm wondering, and it's kind of ironic because you use the term, not wanting to sound crazy. And being the host, it's like, yeah, I'm about to go there myself.
It's okay.
But when you're describing, all of this, I'm wondering if one, the baby was taken because, yes, it was a hybrid and it needed a different environment to become full term.
Hmm.
But then I also have to wonder, was this because, you mentioned seeing humans there, if this was one of the secret programs that, because I've heard of programs that the government, and when I say government, I don't mean like the government we see. I'm talking about a clandestine government where they take infants and breed them for specific uses. And so if you were a part of that,
Yeah. It could easily have been that, they didn't give me any specifics except to say, "This is your baby, hold your baby." I could tell it wasn't fully human. It definitely didn't respond to me the way my human babies responded to me. As a mother, I didn't care. I just wanted it, and I wanted to love it. It did not seem to have any capacity to want to love me back. And yeah, there were humans there. I mean, there were humans working side by side with these things. There were humans, and I was not allowed to talk to the humans, and they weren't supposed to talk to me. And they utilized me and other abductees to show the humans, the people working there, what would happen to them if they did speak. I heard them saying things like, "You don't want this to happen to your daughter, to your wife, to your friends, to your family, blah, blah, blah." And it bothered me for the longest time until, I was mature enough to realize, A, how protective I am of my own family and friends and loved ones and everyone. And B, that I figure these people who had these jobs, either they lived there full time or they got a job and they got this great clearance and they got signed an NDA and someone saying, "You're going to do this wonderful job because you're so smart. We love you. We picked you for this job." And so excited to do it. And then you get into it. And once you're in it, you can't get out of it. You're stuck. You know,
right?
I mean, think about how easy it would be to get someone into that program and they're just stuck in there. So I feel bad for those people that were working there too. But we live in a world where children are disposable. They use children are bought and sold like cattle, like a commodity. Um, and it's terrible, but it's true. And I was taken from such a young age, and I was groomed and programmed to be part of, this whole thing that I was in my whole life, so that I wouldn't speak about it, so that my brain was just trained to go on with the life and not ever bring it up, except every now and then in a hushed circle. And then I'm like looking all around going, someone's going to see or hear me.
Yeah.
and and that's no way to live. But it's not just me. If I was the only person talking about this, I could see someone going, okay, you're crazy. But I'm not. It's not just me. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of people who've experienced this exact same thing. You wouldn't believe it if I told you how many people have said to me, I could have written the exact same thing. That exactly mirrors what happened to me. Except for those of us, our details of our lives are different, but the things that happen to us, it's happened to so many people. And the fact that our government has spent decades convincing the country and the people of the world that this is the stuff of conspiracy theories and you're crazy if you talk about it, you know, it just serves to make their cover up even more complete and make those of
Right.
us who try to come forward look crazy. But we're not crazy. What happened is real. We have the proof. We have the proof on our bodies. We have the proof taken from our bodies. And we have the proof in here. And we know things that there's no other way I could know those things if this didn't happen to me. It's just that simple. Our stories all line up. Before we meet each other, like for L.A. Marzulli, he interviewed 4 people we had never met. Our stories lined up perfectly. And then when we met in person and we met via Zoom, oh, it was the most incredible thing, because finally there were people with these things in common, and who I knew wouldn't judge me and would believe me. People like you, obviously, there are good people out there who will listen and who believe, um, and are there for people. But there's um, there's a lot of skeptics out there, and a lot of people whose only job is to try to make good people sound crazy, and that's sad.
Right. And in full transparency, the reason I'm aware of some of these things and why I put together the correlations like I have been is because I'm finding out in my series Writing Through the Unknown
Mhm.
that I was a part of the secret space programs and a part of
Oh,
some clandestine things. And so as you're talking, it's like, yes, I can put together and say, that sounds like this sounds like this.
oh, I'm sorry to
Okay.
hear that.
And so, and part of that too, though, also is I'm curious when you say, you met your kids when they were older.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, did they come looking more human-esque, or did they come in their natural forms, and
Right.
what was it like?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I write about that in the book. I talk about it in L.A. Marzulli's movie in a little bit more depth. But it happened one night. I wanted them. I wanted to see them. I knew they were out there, and I wanted to meet them because I'd seen them as, tiny. I just wanted to know if there was any way I could help them, save them, do anything. And, but I also knew that it was not something I should be doing necessarily, because I could be out of my depth. Anyway, one night I wake up in the middle of the night. It's kind of the 3, 4 o'clock in the morning time, and there's 3 kids standing by my bed, and I thought they were just my current children at first. And I said the names of a couple of my kids. Hey, what's wrong? As any mom would do initially. And I'm like, hey, so and so, what's wrong? And as I'm, waking up, getting my bearings about me, and my eyes are focusing, I realize, oh, wait, these are too short to be my current children. And I hit my husband. I'm like, hey, wake up, look at this. And he is out cold, not responding at all, which is so unlike him. I'm just pounding on him, trying to get him to wake up. So I look back over at them. There's 3 of them standing there. They're wearing what looks like gray hooded sweatshirts, kind of. They're dark. It's really dark in the room, too, so it's hard to see. But their skin looks dark, almost blue. They're very stocky, very short, very chunky kids. Their eyes look just dark, almost black. So they could have been like black-eyed kids. It's just I couldn't see them in enough light to verify for sure that they were. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's you. Oh, and I'm so excited. And they're doing the mind speak, as opposed to verbal. And they don't look human, but they don't look not human. Do you know what I mean? They're somewhere in between. So they're definitely hybrid. They're like, you have to come with us. And I'm like, no, I'm not coming with you. And I could just feel this evil emanating off of them. It was like they were mad at me, like they were angry with me. And the evil feeling in the room was palpable. You could cut it with a knife. It was just so dense. And the fear and the evil, I mean, it was like looking at a rattlesnake about to strike. And you and I know that, being in Texas, that's a real thing. And I look at him, I'm like, no, I can't go with you. What's wrong? And they just kept saying, you have to come with us. You have to come with us. And I'm like, I can't go with you. No. And they just I could tell they were just getting more and more angry with me. And I said, no, in Jesus' name, I'm not going. And, it's just such a habit at that point for me to say that, and because I knew, whenever I would be approached by them at night, not these guys, but by grays or anything like that I could call Jesus and they would be gone. And so I'm like, no, in Jesus' name, no, I'm not going with you. The second I said that, they were gone. And as soon as they were gone, my husband just sits straight up in bed and he's like, what? And I'm like, whoa, why couldn't you have woken up, 5 minutes ago when they showed up? But, that's how it works. I mean, people get put into this just sleep state where they don't do nothing. They're like dead to the world kind of sleep. And they were gone. And I knew that I was so grateful for that opportunity because I got to see them. But I also knew that they didn't love me. They had no love for me. They showed no love. They showed no compassion, no kindness. They weren't happy to see me. They just were there to get me. And they looked enough like my other kids. I could see resemblance. I could see myself in them. But I knew without a shadow of a doubt that there was nothing for me with them. And they didn't want anything to do with me. They were just working for part of that bigger program. And they were not benevolent. They were not kind. They were not loving. And I have been blessed with amazing children, and adopted children and kids who call me mom. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm grateful that I got closure. But it was scary. It was very scary.
And I kind of have to commend you, and because not a lot of parents would, after wanting to see their kids, having them right in front of them, have the courage to go, this doesn't feel right, so no, I'm not going. A lot of parents, I think, would be like, okay, let's go. I want a chance to know you and be with you and forget their gut feeling and being like, no, I'm going to override that with the paternal feeling.
Yeah. Well, and it's not that maternal feeling wasn't there, because it really was. And I was so excited to see them. But the evil feeling was overpowering and overwhelming. And I'd already had so much understanding of being able to stop the bad things from happening, that had they been good beings, me calling out the name of Jesus wouldn't have hurt them at all. They would have stayed. So had they been children that God wanted me to be able to have time with, calling out Jesus' name would not have hurt anything at all. They would have still been there, and they would have been loving towards me. So, but I think any parent feeling that kind of evil, you do go into protective mode for your other children. I had other kids in the house. They were grown, but still, there were other kids in the house, and I'm going to protect them at all costs. So, but thank you for saying that. But I do think if you were in that situation and felt that kind of evil, you wouldn't question it.
That's one of those you never
You
know
never
until
know.
you're in that moment
Right.
because
And I wouldn't blame anyone for whatever choices they made in that, because I understand that's a really difficult scenario to be in. Trust me, I know. And whatever, I don't know. I can't say how someone else would react. I'm just grateful that I'm okay and that my children are okay. And that's the end of that.
and I'm grateful that you had the foresight and wisdom to come up with a way to stop it so that you could help others who are being taken and utilized for whatever purposes. And maybe them hearing this, they'll be able to say, you know what? If it worked for her, why can't it work for me?
Exactly. Exactly. It works for so many people. And it's not like you have to be able to yell out any specific words. Got to know in your heart who your creator is. Know that it's theirs too. And that he wants to take care of you and he wants to protect you. Give your heart to God and he'll give you the world. And that includes protecting you from evil. And it doesn't mean that we don't live in a fallen world. And it doesn't mean that bad things don't happen to good people. And there's no, you don't get born and get this guarantee that you're going to have this wonderful, happy, beautiful life. It's not how it works. But there are ways that you can stop things like that from happening. And I'm just grateful that I can share that too. And that's all God. I didn't just stumble on that. I was blessed with being able to find my way back to my faith. And having that has meant everything to me. And so now I just want to spend my time helping anyone I can.
Right. And I have a question that's going to sound odd, and I'll explain in a little bit why I'm asking. But I'm curious if your mom, dad, or anyone in your family was in the military.
Oh, yeah, we have military family members. We have members of the Masons, the Freemasons. My grandfather's a high level Mason. My parents were in the Masons. They put me in Rainbow Girls when I was young. So there's all kinds of different, yeah. And there was even members who weren't actually members of the family, but one of my aunts had a boyfriend. We called him Uncle Eddie. That wasn't his real name. Who visited her often, and there are some stories I can't share here today with you, but maybe another time that she told that were really crazy. So there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot in my history in the background. And I'm
So,
O negative, which is also typical for those of us who are taken and who are used in breeding programs.
so the reason I asked about the military is in talking with a lot of my guests on writing through the unknown who have been in the secret space programs, super soldier programs, there's always a connection of it seems like someone in the military. And so I was curious to see if that's why you were chosen as well as you had that connection. And I had to say I was surprised when you mentioned the uh, Mason, the Freemason aspect, not the Mason. I don't want to confuse people, but the
Mhm.
Freemasons. And I was like, wow, I wasn't expecting that organization to come up.
It comes up a lot. Most of us have that in our family, actually. Of all the people I've talked to, it is probably one of the two most common things I could run across are the O negative blood and the Masons in the family.
So I'm curious too, now that you have had these experiences, and I know you say you stopped them from abducting you, but have you ever been like in public or somewhere and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, they're here? And you can feel them around. And
Yeah. Yes, I have. I absolutely have had that happen more times than I can count. And there have been times I have several friends, good friends in my network that I reach out to when that happens. And I'll be like, oh, they're outside or they're here, or when I'm in a public place, they're here. I can feel them. I can, it sounds weird, but I can feel it. It's like an eighth sense, it's the same way we can touch something that I know when they're there. I just, I know it's an indescribable feeling. I wish I could describe it, but when they're there, it's a very distinct feeling, and I know when they're close by.
So I'm curious if when you feel that and you notice like you may be in a room of two people and you know they're not there for you, do you try to intervene and help the other person by warning them, or do you say, you know what, I'm not going to risk, incurring their wrath?
Oh, I
And
would always help. Yeah. I haven't been in a situation where I knew someone was about to be directly taken and I was there, that I wasn't put to like sleep before it happened. You know what I mean? Because I have been in situations in the past where other people were with me, and then I'm I'm put into that sleep state, and so were they. Um, but no, I haven't been in that scenario where I was certain they were coming and they were going to take someone else, like who was in the room. But if I was, I would grab that person and I would start praying, and I would not stop until these entities were gone. And I would do it. I'm not worried about the risk of that because I'm protected by a higher power. So I have no fear from them. I have no fear of them. I'm not going to call on them. I'm not going to tempt fate. But I know if they come at me, then I am protected.
right, and I think it's worth noting that from my experience and from those that I've talked with, when the fear of them is taken away and we start to stand in our own power, the weaker they get and they'll leave you alone and they'll stop coming around. And I'm
Right.
wondering if you find that as well with your group and everything, that when everyone starts standing up for themselves and standing in their power and loses the fear, the less occurrences they have.
Yeah, when for me, I stand in God's power. I don't have any power, but the power is God through me and within me. And so when I stand in that power, absolutely, they're not going to touch me. And yeah, it changes everything. And for everyone else I've spoken with who's in that scenario, yes, it is the same way. It's not that they haven't tried to come back. It's not that I don't still have panic attacks or get upset about them when I feel them around. But I know I don't have to be afraid of them anymore. I know they can't take me anymore. And the longer I stand in that strength and God's strength, the less frequent their attempts are at taking me. And because they know that if they show up, I'm calling on their creator, who's also my creator, who is looking out for me, and they can't do anything about it, and they know it. And so they'll try to trick me, they'll try to get, find other ways around, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. And I like how you quoted as being my creator, their creator, the same creator. Because a lot of people take the opinion of, because say they're Lyran or they're, different race, then they can't be of God. And it's like, well,
That's
that's
crazy.
kind of arrogant of us to assume who God created and didn't create.
Right? Yeah, we're just, I mean, honestly, we are so low on the totem pole, but so many people think that we are the apex predator and that we are all that exists. If you try to pack these entities into our little world and our little earth, you're in for a very rude awakening. You know, we are so far down on the totem pole, it's not funny. But the good news is it's okay because our creator doesn't want us to be bothered by these entities. That's not how he wants it to be. And so we do have that protection. And, without it, we would. I guarantee you, none of us would be here without that protection. Not one of us. So, I'm grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that.
Right. So we're actually a few minutes over the hour.
Yes.
So where can people find you? I know you mentioned your website. You can go to there. Do you want
Right.
to post that out?
Yeah, I will.
Or
I'll share all that. I'll give you all that for the show notes, and you should have it in what I sent you today. If you need anything, you know how to find me, and so we can share it. And I'll share it with your interview too when we share it across social media. You can find the book Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest exclusively only at lamarzulli.net. That's LAMARZULLI.net. lamarzulli.net. Go to that store tab on there. You can find a link to that on my website, which is KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com. So all one word, KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under my name, Karin Wilkinson on Facebook, Karin Wilkinson Author on Instagram. And all of those have links to all the others. So if you find one, you can find all the others. If you want to get a hold of me, please don't hesitate. The easiest way, I get a lot of messages through Facebook and Instagram. I don't often get back to those as quickly as I'd like because I get so much garbage in between the real messages. If you want to reach out to me, please do so through my website. I have a contact page on there, and that will come directly to my mail, and I'll know that it's a legitimate message. And I will get back to you. It may not be as quickly as I want to, depending on how many messages I'm going through and what's going on, but I will get back to you. I do get through all the messages. And if you want me to get back to you and you ask, that we can get back to each other, I will. So please reach out to me through my website if you have any questions, comments, or you just want to share something, and just know you're not alone. I think that's the most important thing, that it's okay. This has happened to so many people. You're not alone.
right, and I can vouch for the fact that you are quite actually more quickly responsive than a lot of people that I've come across,
Oh,
because
thank you.
I was like, I remember writing a message and it was like within like maybe even less than a day, I was like getting dinged and I'm like, oh, hey, she's responded
Oh,
twice.
well, I
It's,
appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone who reaches out to me. Everyone who reaches out to me, I appreciate so much. And just to be on shows like yours, I appreciate it so much. Just the opportunity to share this means the world to me, and I have so much respect for you and the work that you're doing. Thank you. It really means a lot. So thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it.
well, thank you for that. And before we go, I'm curious, is there any pearls of wisdom that you want to leave people with before we go?
You know, that's a really good question. The only thing I really want to leave people with is you're not alone. If something like this is happening to you, you're not crazy. It's okay. You can stop it. There are people you can reach out to, people like Michael here, people like me. There are websites. There are all kinds of resources popping up everywhere. So, the biggest thing is don't give up. You're not alone. There are answers, there are options, and you can be free of things like this if you want to. It's your choice, no one else's but yours.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and that was beautiful. And
Thank you.
while you were doing that, I was thinking, I like to, I'm starting to end shows with like asking an obscure question. And I was thinking while you were talking about that, going, what could I ask? And then it dinged in my head that you mentioned, yeah, you're in Texas as
Mm-hmm.
well. So my question, if you're up for it, is barbecue. Who
Oh.
makes the best barbecue and why?
Oh, that's such a good question. There's so much good barbecue out there and so many old standbys that have been around Austin forever. I have to give it to Rudy's. And I know everyone's like, what? No, because it's one of the first that I ever had here in Austin. I loved that it was out of the back of a gas station back then. It wasn't a big chain, and it was the best barbecue. Rudy's and County Line were my first two barbecue establishments. So anyone that smokes a brisket like that, You got my heart. So, but there's just so many good choices. That's a really tough question. What's your favorite?
Actually, I've had Rudy's, and Rudy's is up there.
Yeah.
But going to a restaurant, I would have to say we have Dickie's,
Yeah.
and their marinated chicken is so good. But when it comes to burnt ends, though, I gotta give it to Good Union or Bone Daddies.
Oh, Bone Daddies. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Well, when I'm up that way towards you, I'll let you know, and we'll do barbecue together.
There you
And if you
go.
come down my way, we'll do barbecue down here because I've got some cool places we can take you down here too. So I am looking forward to that.
Yeah, so am I. And
Awesome.
so thank you for
Thank
coming on the
you.
show and trusting me. And I know Vicky, thank you for, your support and help with the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Vicky, for the intro. I appreciate it. And Michelle.
And Michelle.
Yes.
Michelle's super cool too.
She's a girl. Yeah, she's awesome too. So, but thank you so much. I've had a great time, and I hope I can come back again.
Definitely. We will
Good.
definitely make that happen.
Great.
And if not on this show, we may have you on. I have two other shows. So I will be in touch. There is the Riding Through the Unknown series, and I also do a paranormal show with a couple of friends that's premiering tomorrow.
Oh,
Shameless
cool.
plug alert.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. Send me a link.
Yes, it's called Paranormal Versus. We're going into season 2, and it will air tomorrow. Go live at 3 o'clock. And Kel Ridley and Matt Atkinson are in the UK, and I'm the lonely one representing the USA. So, you know, got that Texas pride, being the lone standard.
All right. Well, Texas is a good state to represent. So,
So, thank you all for watching, and wherever you are in the world, make it a blessed day, evening, afternoon, night. I think that pretty much covers it all.
yes, thank you, everyone.
So, good night, everyone.
Good night.